Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder of Streamlined Properties and the team leader of Streamlined Properties on Market, brokered by eXp Realty. Whether you are looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Welcome back to another week of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. Before I get to our phenomenal guest for this week, I just want to remind you of a couple podcast tidbits that could be helpful. They're probably more helpful to me, but honestly, I would appreciate it. As this podcast grows, we only can grow with your help. And the best way to grow our podcast is to have more listeners. And the way that we get there is for you to follow the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, like it, click the little dingy button on YouTube, and of course, share it with your friends. And if you're so inclined, write us a 5-star review if you believe we deserve a 5-star review. Now, this week, you're going to love it. She is very popular on YouTube to the tune of 185,000 subscribers. She's Lili Thompson, known as Lili Invest. She's going to tell you all about how she documented her real estate investing journey over the last 3 years. Let's go. This is episode 46 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Lili Thompson. You may have seen her on YouTube to the tune of over 180,000 subs and all over Instagram with the same as she's documented her real estate investing journey over the last 3 years. Lili, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you and to get you on here to talk about this crazy journey over 3 years. Before those 3 years started, did you have an interest in real estate?
Not particularly. My dad was a real estate agent back when I was younger, when I was like maybe 4 or 5 years old. He was a real estate agent while he was also an active duty soldier in the military. And so I had a little bit of awareness of, he's taking me with him to go pick up a rent check. But I didn't really know what that meant. And then he stopped doing that as I got older. And I had a few mentors who I'm like, that person seems to be living a cool life. What's going on there? And they were like, oh yeah, I have rental property. Didn't know what that meant, was focused on all my other stuff. But eventually, as I started to hear more about real estate, those little things in my past, I was like, oh, wait, hold on. There might be something here.
Yeah, that's how it worked for me. I grew up with my dad was an attorney, but he was an investor. And all we did all weekend when I was at his house was go look at dumps. And I was like, this stinks. Get me a toy. And then as I'm getting older, I'm like, this actually seems pretty cool.
That's how he's getting into this.
Yeah. What led to your transition to say, hey, I'm ready to go in and start to do this myself?
Yeah, I think I got connected with a lot of really interesting people through my basketball career. So I grew up playing basketball. I played basketball in college, and I got to go to 2 really good universities, Stanford and Notre Dame. And a lot of people were successful in a lot of ways, whether it was tech startups or through athletics, going to the NBA, NFL, WNBA, whatnot. But I realized that a lot of these people are making money in a lot of different ways. We're putting a lot of it into real estate. It was all funneling, all roads lead to real estate. Yeah. And so as I realized that, I started to get more interested. I started to read more books, of course, The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Richest Man in Babylon, that type of thing. And I wanted to get to the point where I could cash flow my living expenses. And so that's why house hacking stood out to me as, okay, this can be my first kind of foray into real estate.
Yeah. And is that where you started with the house hack?
It is. I closed 2 weeks before the pandemic lockdown started. So it was good timing, bad timing. I don't know, but it was interesting.
Yeah. Just going back to your basketball career, I think if you look at the scale of, we don't have to go on a full tangent about this, but it's important, women's pay scale in pro sports versus male pro scale, was it more important for you to say, listen, I need something that's going to be a long-term asset because the pay scale differential is insane?
Yeah, I definitely always had that awareness that, okay, even though I'm playing close to the top of the women's basketball world, that's a very different situation than playing close to the top of the men's basketball world
Yeah.
financially. And so I was glad to get to go to great schools. I studied business. I went to business schools. And so I felt well prepared to make a living for myself outside of basketball. But if I was going to be the number one draft pick in the NBA, I probably wouldn't have tried to be house hacking. I would have just practiced basketball more. But
Yeah.
definitely on the women's side, you have to be more aware of just like other ways to get it done.
Yeah. So where did you first hear about house hacking though? It's funny because a lot of people who got started are like, I bought a multi, I didn't know what I was doing and I lived in it. And then there was a term for it at some point. How did you come upon that? Was it just because, hey, this is cool, I can make money, learn how to be a landlord, that type of thing?
It was really through the Bigger Pockets podcast. And I just started listening to episodes. Around this time, I was playing with the Harlem Globetrotters, which maybe you know about them or not, but it's really
Of
historical,
course.
famous basketball team, right? And so we're traveling all over the world. I'm taking flights, I'm driving, which was a great opportunity to listen to podcasts and
Yeah.
audio. And so that's how I got into it. And that's how I came across the term house hacking. And one of my basketball coaches and kind of mentors, as I started having more conversations with him, he was like, oh, yeah, I've done that. And he was doing it to the point of like buying a house, living in it for 1 or 2 years, fixing it up as he goes, still having tenants and roommates in there during his younger post-college years,
Yeah.
paying the rent, and then selling it or keeping it as a rental and moving on and house hacking again. And so I had the Bigger Pockets. I'm learning about this, but then I was like, oh, wait, I actually know someone who has done this. And that's kind of what gave me the confidence, like really dive in.
Yeah. And to your point, we find out later, just like we were saying, we both realized all the stuff that like our dad showed us. But I think you also realize more people are investing in real estate than we think. That's the millionaire next door type of philosophy. Who's that guy with the junky car who always is doing stuff? And then you find out they own 33 rental properties.
Absolutely. And I've had that experience over and over where I meet someone through sports, through school, through whatever it might be. And there's a real estate connection in there somewhere, which as a high schooler, like before I ever started thinking about this, I would have never imagined that. I thought real estate investors are like this tiny subset
Yeah.
of people like living in the high rises and that's it.
Yeah. Have you found though, even as you get into like off market marketing, wholesaling, driving for dollars, that's where I've found it the most. Like when you're doing lists and you're making all the calls and you're making drive connections, you find all these people who are just like regular people. And then they're like, oh, wait, I own 12 other properties. And you're like, what? How many
Yeah.
do you want to sell? And if they're over 65, they're looking to offload them. That's a great way to get deals that the regular novice investor wouldn't understand, that there's all these diamonds in the rough with multiple properties who, for new people, maybe they just want to give us their worst one so we can get our feet wet a little.
Absolutely. I've experienced that with reaching out for deals, right? The same experience. Like I'm talking to somebody about this one house. They've got 5 more with different investors who are trying to level up. And they're like, oh, yeah, I'll sell off a couple of my older properties. I want to maybe 1031 into something new. It's a lot more prevalent than I would have thought.
Yeah. And so how did the first house hack go? Let's get into that because that's what a lot of people are listening. They're trying to get into their first house hack. It's a little bit tough right now, but how did you do your first house hack?
Yeah, so I was coming out of college. And so I didn't have 2 years of job history, but I could show that I had been in school and that I had been building up some savings while I was in school. I wasn't working because I was a full-time basketball player and student, but I've been able to build up some savings just from some various different things. And my parents were able to co-sign for me. And whenever I say that, I want to be transparent. I'm not like, yeah, I did this all on my own. I want to be transparent about kind of the resources I used. And the YouTube comment section is a crazy place. So it can be really great and really bad sometimes. And when I say that, sometimes it swings to the other side where it's like, oh, well, darn, you had somebody co-sign. Of course you could do it. And then it's like people throw up their hands like, then that means that I can't do it. But the reason I say that is to say, if your current situation doesn't allow you to get the home you want, qualify for the loan you want to, what are the other options? And I didn't even know co-signing was an option.
Yeah.
And so I wish somebody had said, find a co-signer or find a roommate or whatnot. And so I was able to get my parents to co-sign. The other consideration was possibly like having a friend or a sibling go in on the loan with me and us being co-owners. But it just worked out that my parents were able to co-sign. And the thing I told them was like, hey, I've done my research. I've educated myself. You guys won't have to put a dime of your money in. I had the down payment and reserves saved up. I was working, so I was able to provide for my portion of the rent and have my tenants' rent. So I think they felt confident that I had really put in the work and kind of showed them I was prepared for it, and that it wasn't going to be their money on the line in that sense. And so once we got qualified for that loan, I had, the FHA loan with a 3.5% down payment. I was looking for a duplex. And it was actually my loan officer who told me about another opportunity I wasn't aware of, where he said, hey, you're a first-time buyer. There's a state program that will gift you your down payment for being a first-time home buyer. And the state actually came in and provided my 3.5% down payment for me. I still paid a little bit in closing costs, but that just gave me even more reserves, which turned out being really good because 2 weeks after I closed were all of the lockdowns and stuff for COVID. And so it ended up that the tenant who I had that was going to move in was going to be moving in from out of state, but they got stuck during the lockdowns. And so it was actually like 3 to 4 months before they actually came and moved in, which luckily I was still able to float the mortgage payment with just my own income. And I ended up moving into my parents' house during lockdown. And once I realized, okay, this isn't going to be over anytime soon. And I put my property up on Airbnb and rented it out to some traveling nurses who were coming in to help out in the local hospitals. So it did end up all working out, but that's kind of how we got there.
Yeah, and that's how a lot of people got into MTR, just because like their travel nurses were going everywhere. They needed the services. So you were really like an intended house hack that turned into a midterm rental. That's great experience to get started. How did that go though, as like the landlording part, just both managing short-term rentals as a brand new investor? One thing before you answer that, I just wanted to go back on one thing because I think it's really important. You basically made a presentation to your parents. And I think that's what's important for people to understand. If you need help in the beginning and you do your research and you could create whatever it is, like a mini deck or something, that's when people are going to say, yeah, I'm confident in this. And that can translate all the way up to raising money later for syndications. But I think that's something really important that you said that people should take note of. You can't just go and ask someone, hey, can you give me the down payment on multifamilies? I don't really know anything. I listened to 2 podcasts. Can I have money? Like you said, I've got it covered. This is what I'm doing. I want a house hack. This is how it works, right? That's a big thing.
I totally agree. And it was funny because like my last year of college and going into when I was looking for the house hack, I stopped listening to music in the car and I was only listening to podcasts and audiobooks. And at first my parents were kind of like, that's a little weird. But after a couple of months, they're like, oh, you're really serious about this. They're riding in the car with me. They're listening to Bigger Pockets too. And so, I think showing people that you're willing to put in the work and that you're prepared and that you care about what you're asking them to provide, like you're actually going to take care of it. I think that's got to be the first step.
Yeah. And one thing I think is so cool about Bigger Pockets is there's so many episodes now that if you're a new investor, you can look for something that you want. If you're 23, you were young at the time, you can look for all of the episodes with young investors. So you can always find somebody who's at close to your level or just above what you want to do. And you can skip the apartment syndications to later because there's so many options. The podcast availability, I think, has really helped investors get the confidence to then go out and meet people. Because you did that all during the pandemic, was it hard for you to then build those like meetup relationships during that time frame to get going?
I actually don't think so, because I think the online usage of like online forums and Facebook groups exploded over the in-person meetups when things shut down. And so I did make a lot of connections just online, Bigger Pockets forum, local Facebook groups, helped me connect with other local investors. And one thing I will say about the podcast is, and I even say this about like my own YouTube channel, like there's really valuable information in like that short form content. But if you find something that you're interested in, like a podcast episode or a YouTube video, I think diving into long form content and like going and reading an actual book about it and like getting that more A to Z information it just takes your knowledge level over the top.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you really have to, I think book learning is really important for investors because then you've got the highlight. You're going to get more systematic like that if you're reading books that can help you figure out how to structure costs for a project much easier than if you're listening. You're listening, you're not taking notes, you're driving. Like you said, I listen a lot while I'm driving. You have to add them all together. And then what got you from the first house hack to the next investment? And then where did you go from there?
It was realizing that I really enjoyed the process of looking for a deal, analyzing deals. There wasn't too much negotiating in that house hack, but I was like, oh man, this is really fun. I'm really enjoying this. I had started the YouTube channel documenting that process of getting the house hack, and it being during the pandemic and whatnot. And so I was like, I want to keep going, but I don't necessarily want to wait a year until I've lived in this property for a year and I can move into another primary residence. And so I looked into what's the next best thing. I knew that I didn't necessarily want to flip houses because, again, my goal was to cash flow my living expenses.
Right.
And so I was like, how do I get into rentals? But that seems pretty risky to start off with. And that's when I stumbled across wholesaling.
Yeah, let's talk about wholesaling, because wholesaling has a horrendous reputation, but I still advocate that there can be really good wholesalers. They're just harder to find because it's, in my opinion, an industry where people think it's going to be a lot easier than it is. So they do it the wrong way. What was your experience, and how do you think you can help people in terms of how you can be an ethical wholesaler who, hey, we're looking for win-wins here?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely had that same perception. The first time one of my friends, he played with me on the Harlem Globetrotters, the first time he told me about wholesaling, I was like, that sounds illegal. And he was like, no, look it up, do your research. But I was super skeptical.
Yeah.
But as I looked into it, I understood why some people had a negative perception and how some people were doing it right. And I actually started wholesaling on market. I was not sending out direct mail or cold calling. What I was doing, and again, this is at a different stage in the market than we're at now.
Yeah, that's important. That's important.
Yeah. And I don't want to ignore that fact, right? Because what was happening in 2020, 2021 is different than now. But I realized that there were a lot of distressed properties on market. There were a lot of cash only as is listed on Zillow, listed on Redfin. And what I would do is I would reach out to those agents and I would be completely honest. And I would say, hey, I do not have the cash in my bank account to do this, but I would like to help you wholesale this deal. It's been on market for 120 days. It's not moving. They're not getting paid from it just sitting there. Yeah. And so I just come in with that honest approach. And yes, many of them said, nope, don't work with wholesalers. Click. That happened.
But for the same reason, though, no, realistically, most wholesalers are terrible. I think we all know that. But
right.
That's where the perception is. And then eventually, though, you talk to a couple and they're like, okay, actually, this may work. And that's just persistence on your part by saying, let me keep trying. Yeah. What happened when you did get a couple yeses? Because it's harder on the MLS because I guess the counter thought to it is hey, the same person who's going to buy your end product, they could just buy it now. So how did you get around that?
And that was a mistake I made the first few times. And I think it's good to separate, you can make honest mistakes. That doesn't make you a bad person or a bad whole.
Yeah.
And there's videos on my YouTube channel. So man, that doesn't make sense. If a property is listed on market for say 150,000 and I get it under contract at 150,000, why would an investor buy it from me for 155 or 160? It doesn't make any sense. What I realized was if that property, let's say it's on market for 150,000, it's been on market for 90, 120 days. I can negotiate that price down. I don't have to offer 150,000.
Yeah. And
so I think that's where my competitive advantage came in, and the benefit I could bring to an end buyer was I would negotiate that 150,000 down to 125, 130, whatever actually made the deal work.
Yeah.
And then I would take it to the investor for 130, 135. And so now they've got a discount off the MLS listing price. The homeowner has actually sold the property for cash after it's sitting on the market for months. And I've been able to make a little bit of a spread. The agent also gets their commission from the seller side.
Yeah.
So that's how I tried to create that win-win, is by just negotiating and actually getting that deal to a price that makes sense for an end buyer.
Yeah, that's a great point, because a lot of sellers are stubborn, but then it's cold. So they're not getting any offers. They're not going to tell the agent to reduce because then they feel like they're going to get even less. So maybe there is some leverage there. It can be market specific, but yeah, that works. I think the wholesaler's job is to bring in clients that any property can't get themselves. So if they're from a different area, they're not going to be checking the MLS also. Yeah, I think that's a great point. But you obviously faced some opposition to wholesaling just because it has a bad reputation. How did you get through that and then create a system that worked for you?
I think the best thing is just ask people why they have that opposition. So there's multiple times where I would say to a real estate agent, I say, okay, I can understand you've had a bad experience with wholesaling. Can you tell me what went wrong? Can you tell me what you're trying to make sure doesn't happen? And they say, oh, we would get right up until closing day and they just wouldn't show up. They wouldn't answer the phone. We think we're showing up at the closing table to sell and nothing happens. I'll say, okay, what if, yeah, we're going to do a 30-day close, but let's do a 5-day due diligence. And after that, my earnest money becomes hard. Right? It becomes non-refundable.
Yeah.
So after 5 days, we'll actually know for sure whether or not we're closing, whether or not you're getting this non-refundable earnest money, rather than you waiting till day 29 of 30 for the closing.
Yeah.
And so some situations like that, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think really trying to pinpoint what it is that the person is afraid of and then seeing if you can bring a solution. I had another agent who just wasn't too familiar with, this was like their first distressed property that they had gotten as a listing.
Yeah.
And so they just weren't too familiar with how things worked with an all cash deal. And so they were like, this seller still has a mortgage on their property. And so they can't take cash. And I had to explain to them like, yeah, as long as it's more than a mortgage.
They would really like cash.
Yeah, they would really like cash because we're going to come in, we're going to bring cash, the mortgage balance to get paid off. And then what's left is the net to you guys. And so sometimes just asking one more question. When they say, I don't work with wholesalers, being like, hey, I understand that. Can I just ask you what went wrong, what you want to avoid? And sometimes that gets you through the door.
Yeah, that's a perfect question, though, because it's open-ended. There's a book called Exactly What to Say by Phil Jones, and then they have a couple different versions. That's like a question that is very something similar to what's in there. It opens up a dialogue to allow someone to say what their problems were. And then it gives you an opening to say, this is why I'm not like that. Or that's valid, but here's what I would do. And I like the idea of what you're saying. I don't like when wholesalers say upfront, like non-refundable, because it's you're barely giving me access. Like, give me a couple days. I still want to do a due diligence inspection, make sure I didn't miss anything. But yeah, real estate as a whole is pretty shifty. So I think by what you're doing, you put out so much content that can just help alleviate that. And people say, oh, okay, you can mess up, or this is what happens with the deal. Did you feel like it was I know from reading that you really wanted to help people get through that and see, hey, it's really not that hard, but also like you have work to do it. It's like the double-edged sword thing.
Yeah, it is. And I think I felt uncomfortable in the beginning when I'm consuming content, I'm looking at things with, hey, this is really difficult or this is really easy. I think the truth, like most things, probably lies somewhere in the middle in the sense of this isn't easy. Like, it's not just a walk in the park, put no work in, learn nothing, go find success. It's also not brain surgery. And it's not super, super complicated. And so I like to say, instead of easy or difficult, it's possible.
Yeah.
Right? It's possible with the correct work and perseverance. And I think that mentality is what helped me stick with it. Because if I thought it was too difficult, I would just not have started.
Yeah.
And if I thought it was too easy, the first time something went wrong, I would have just quit. So I think kind of in the middle is what helped me to say, okay, that went wrong. Let's try again on this next one. Okay, that went well. Let's keep it going. So I think that balanced approach helps you stick through the adversity.
This week's episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing is brought to you by my investor-friendly real estate team, Streamline Properties on Market, brokered by eXp Realty. I have more than 30 agents on my team, and we are investor-friendly. We work traditional buyers and sellers, but we also focus on investors. So whatever your investor needs are in the state of New Jersey, parts of Pennsylvania, parts of New York, and a small part of Nevada, we have you covered, as our goal is to figure out first what your investment needs are and then how we can help you reach them. Let's get back to the show. Were you someone in the beginning who was able to look at a bunch of properties? Because I found that, I guess a lot of brand new investors, they say, oh, I vetted 25 deals this week. And I say, how many did you see? And they're like, 0. So how are you going to learn anything? You don't know what the house even smells like at 45 grand. It doesn't smell good. You know, were you able, because of the pandemic at the time, as you were getting going, were you able to see properties to get more comfortable with what the costs mean in real life?
Right away, no, because there was like that shutdown on viewings and you had to like FaceTime the agents.
Yeah.
But even once things opened up and you were allowed to go back into properties with masks and stuff, you can see on my channel, like I did a lot of walkthroughs when we're wearing masks and we're trying to stay socially distant. And that definitely helped because I was like, oh yeah, it stinks in here. oh, that's what mold looks like.
Yeah.
That's what water damage or whatnot looks like. And I think getting up close and personal helps with that.
Yeah.
Another thing I did do, though, to help with the rehab costs, because I'm not a contractor, I didn't necessarily know, is I asked my buyers, right? So even if I had sent a deal out to a buyer and they said no, I would ask them, hey, can you tell me what you thought the renovation budget would be?
Yeah.
Because maybe I had it $20K too low because they saw these other things. And that kind of helped me to, I guess, get more accurate in my estimates. And now we've done some things like on the channel where we've tried to put together these like rehab calculators that have some basic prices and price per square foot range for things like carpet or the laminate built into it to help beginners do that. But asking your buyer, I think, is also a really good method because they want you to get better so that you send them better deals and stop wasting your time with the bad ones.
Yeah.
So if you can like almost get them to coach you for free a little bit, then you can give them better deals and it's a win-win.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I guess what my thing on wholesalers is usually, again, this is mostly the bad ones, is that the ARV is too high and the rehab budget's too low. And so you look at it and I can look at the photos and know exactly what it's going to cost. But like you said, once I know that the numbers are good on a wholesaler, I will buy from them all the time. They can just call me. And I think is that what you were trying to develop? You're trying to do it by saying, hey, what do you think? And then you're building relationships and then also building credibility, not trying to hoodwink, which is all off market. People are worried about that because it happens all the time.
It does. I was absolutely worried about that. Not worried about it, I was absolutely aware of that. And I was thinking about it from like a business standpoint where if you go to a restaurant to order your favorite meal and they give you a bigger portion than you expected, you're going to be happy. But if you go to a restaurant and order your favorite meal and they give you a smaller portion than expected, you're not going to be so happy. So that's how I wanted investors to feel about the deals I was sending them. Like, oh, I'm going to underestimate my ARV and I'm going to overestimate my rehab budget so that if the deal ends up being better than I even said it was, oh, I've got that buyer, we've got a relationship, versus, oh, that deal was slightly worse than Lili said it was. My portion size was slightly smaller. It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah. So what type of spreads were you looking for in the beginning? Because I also think that wholesalers are trying to take too much these days. They're like trying to hit 30, 40,000 on a deal. And I'm like, you're new. Try to, like you said, try to make it like 5, 10, and then the next person can make some money too. If everybody makes money, then everybody's happy. So when you first started, how much were you looking to make on those wholesale deals? Because I think people are just trying to bite off too much now.
Yeah, I think there's a balance. So like at the beginning, I would have taken anything, right? I was saying like, grand, cool. And I messed myself up a little bit because I set my margins too small. So I send out a deal, I'm only trying to make $3 to $5 grand. Then a buyer's negotiating with me and they're trying to negotiate down $3 to $5 grand. And I'm in a situation where I can't make anything. I have no room. And it's not even that I don't want to wiggle. I just can't.
You don't want to take a loss. Yeah.
Exactly. So then I started really working in like 10 to 15,000 for myself and being willing to negotiate and make that a good deal. And that's what ended up happening. My very first deal, it was an on-market deal with a real estate agent. It was as is. And I ended up making 6,000. I was trying to make 10,000, but got negotiated down a little bit. I was super happy with that 6,000.
Yeah.
And the other way we got that deal done was, yes, I was honest with the real estate agent and she was a little reluctant, but I asked her, why has the property been on market so long? Is there an issue there? Maybe I can help solve it. And it actually was. It was that one, it was an older woman who wasn't going to be able to empty out the house. There was just so much stuff in there. She wasn't going to be able to get a moving truck and get stuff out. And she also needed a longer closing because the place she was moving to, she might have been moving into assisted living or something. But the place she was moving to wasn't going to be available until a certain date with like after the closing. And so it's just like a weird situation. And so what I negotiated into the contract was take whatever you want, leave everything else. And from the day that we close, we'll do a little bit of a lease back so that the assisted living can get money from the closing, get your space ready, and then you can still move in. And so that's what helped me get the deal. And then I just communicated that to the buyer. They made sure they understood, here's what's going to happen post-closing. Take that into account when you're running your numbers. And so, I ended up making $6K. I think she had the maybe like a 30, 45-day lease back. She left a lot of stuff in the property, but they were doing a full gut anyway. And so they
Exactly.
just sold it or threw it away or whatnot. And it all worked out. But yeah, if I had tried to swing for the fences and make 30K on that, wouldn't have worked. If I had only been trying to make 3K, wouldn't have worked. So I generally tell people work in like 10 to 15 for yourself because that gives you some
Yeah.
room to wiggle, but it's also dependent on your market. I worked with one gentleman who was out in California and he made 40K on his
Yeah.
first deal, but he was wholesaling like a $300,000 house that after being fixed up was going to be worth like 700,000.
Yeah, exactly.
And so 40K was still a pretty small portion of the net margin.
Yeah, I love what you said, though. You've just given like perfect coaching advice for new wholesalers and off market acquisition specialists because it's not about the money a lot of times with off market sellers. It's about solving the problem that they have. And agents don't know how to do that. So you coming in is like the enlightenment, like, oh, hey, what if you're doing a renovation, why wouldn't you let them leave all their stuff? You can sell like appliances on Facebook Marketplace and put the rest in the dumpster. Sure, you might need an extra dumpster, but okay, there you go, $600, you're all set. And matching closing dates or giving a free lease back when you're not in an urgent state to do it are great things. I think there's so many coaching programs that are out there that teach everyone to just do bandit signs and say quick cash when they didn't need cash. She needed to figure out how she could stay and go. So I just think that's a great point. And is that things that you've tried to get across in your YouTube channel is like more of a realistic, this podcast is about the mindful approach to real estate investing. And I've watched your channel and seen that you're just trying to tell people like the reality of what it is instead of trying to trick them into this big funnel that is going to make them $1 million in 2 weeks as a wholesaler.
Yeah, and it's absolutely my approach because although I do teach and I do work with students, the point of the teaching is a more condensed and directed version of the YouTube channel, right? The YouTube channel is just everything that's happening. It's the mistakes, the good stuff. It's what I thought was right then and what I think is right now. And you could go back and watch 3 years worth of videos, or I could just condense it for you into the less fluff version. But either way, I think that when you're going into this, you have to realize it's not a get rich quick scheme. And you have to approach it in that way. And it really is a relationship business. I know everybody said that when I was first getting into it. And I was like, what does that really mean? It means that one-time buyer becomes a 5, 10, 20-time buyer.
Exactly.
It means that a one-time contractor becomes a 5, 10, 20-time contractor. The title companies, the agents that you're working with, it's much better to do one kind of good deal that leads to many good deals than to just swing for the fences and maybe get over on somebody one time and then never do any other deals.
Yeah.
And so that's been my approach. And one of the ways that has showed up is even when calling those on-market deals, if I say, hey, I'm a wholesaler, I'd like to make an offer on this property. And they say, hey, actually the seller doesn't want wholesalers or my broker doesn't like wholesalers for on-markets, whatever. I've had agents call me and say, hey, I got a distressed property, but it's just in such bad condition. We're not even going to list it. Do you want to take a look at it? And so it's like almost a failure on the front end because I didn't get that one that I was calling about, but you're honest, you make the relationship and maybe something comes around on the back end.
Yeah. And same as what we said before, you call on one property, 123 Main Street, and they're like, nah, this one's really cash flowing well, but I have 3 like 6 blocks away. And you're like, ooh. Yeah, they're like, I really don't like those. And you're just spinning. And one thing we were talking about before, when we're talking about the spread, like I think 10 or 15 is a great metric to start with, market dependent, but also it's dependent on how good of a negotiator you are. The better you get at negotiating, the more you can create a spread. And then if it's a wholesaler that you really like you're saying, and you want to do 10 deals, you just let them get a little more on that one. The mindset of short term is what kills all businesses, but definitely in investing. If you try to grease somebody, like you said, that could be 20 deals. They could buy 20 deals from you over the next time. But if you just tried to get $5,000 extra from them off of one for no reason, when they're just asking like, hey, just throw me this one. Sometimes you have to try the relationship. They won't all work out. Someone will fake you out sometime, but then you just never sell them another deal.
And you might get that extra $5,000 on the first one. But what would 20 more deals down the road have been worth? And it was actually interesting because I ran into a similar situation where I had been doing a couple of deals with a particular buyer. And I'm sure I sent him like 2 or 3 bad deals first. And then I was like, hey, can you give me some feedback? How'd you run your numbers, et cetera? And then he bought a couple from me. And I sent him a deal and he came out to see it and walk it with me. And he's like, this is a solid deal, but I have my hands full right now. And so I'm really going to only buy like a home run deal.
Yeah.
But why don't you take this one yourself? And I'm like, yeah, I've saved up a little bit from wholesaling, but I don't really want to put like everything I've made wholesaling on the line for my first deal. And it was like, oh, I'll connect you with my hard money lender. And so that's how I ended up doing my first bird deal, keeping it for myself. But I don't think he would have given me that connection. And that hard money lender was like, I can see that you've worked with multiple local investors who've said you've done a good job, so we're willing to give you this loan. I don't think any of that would have happened without multiple successful deals on the front end with that first investor.
Yeah, and you would have been looking at a much higher rate. You either need bona fide experience that's market, like you can see it all there in the transactions, or other people vouching for you, because they definitely have more leeway in the hard money game. But the rates right now are really rough for hard money. So
yeah, they are. And it is tough. And that's something I tell people that I work with is wholesaling can actually be a really good resume builder, not just a capital builder, but a resume builder. Because I sent over to the hard money lender, hey, here's a list of deals and the investors that I sold them to. That, and I asked the investors permission first, but like that can vouch for me that I know how to negotiate a deal. I know how to understand what makes a good deal. And that definitely helped me as almost like a resume, even though I didn't have any experience doing the deals myself. That helped out with the lender.
Yeah, but another thing that's important that we talked about when you were making the presentation for the cosigner to your parents is that you went into this treating it like a business. And so many people are just like, side hustle job, and they're not really into it. But nobody wants to put a lot of money into that relationship with someone who's just like half in it. So I can just tell by the way you're presenting these scenarios that you're saying like, hey, here's a list of buyers. Like someone's like, oh, okay. Yeah, just like you presented it to your parents. And I think that's more of what people need to do, even trying to get mentors. I'm sure you get a million DMs all the time of people, hey, can I ask you a question? How do I become a real estate investor? And you're like, I can't, like, tell me a scenario that you're trying for. You tried to do X and you came up with Z and you just want to know, which should I do, A or B? That's like such an easier thing for people like us to answer. But if you found that like the way that you present can help all of, especially for like your students that are taking classes from you now and learning what to do, they have to learn the presentation aspect much more than I think they think to be successful.
I totally agree. And like, I'm a business-minded person, right? Like I view myself as an entrepreneur that right now is focusing on the business of real estate, but I have lots of different business interests. And so I think carrying that over to, this is a business. I am a business. So I have to represent myself in that way. I think that's a much better mindset to have than like, oh, it's a side hustle, quick way to get $10,000 a month or whatnot. And so, I think that approach definitely helps with building trust, with getting your ducks in a row and feeling like, okay, I can actually execute this.
Yeah. When you started in wholesaling and even your whole wholesaling investment journey, did you find it more difficult as a female because it's very male centric in the wholesaling world? Or were you able to just, because of your business acumen, to just get past that? Because I talk to all my female investor friends the same, and there are always parts of the process that are super sexist. So I always wonder how much it affected you and how you got past it.
Yeah, it definitely has an impact. I walk through the world as a Black woman, and I'm also a younger Black woman. And so I'm usually the youngest person there. I'm usually one of the only women there. I'm usually, in my market, one of the only Black people there.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that has an effect on just how we all experience the world. But I've met people who have been amazing, and I've had some difficult experiences that I find my own ways to work around. It's funny, I hired a kind of a quote getter for me who would just go out and walk through properties with different contractors. And we did a little experiment that we showed on the channel, which I thought was funny, where I walked through the property with a contractor and got a quote. And then the guy who was working for me, who's a young white guy, walks through the same property with the same contractor, gets a quote, and his quote is 25% lower, of course. And sometimes that happens. And I'm sure there's other women who have experienced similar things. I've had people come to the job site and they're looking for the boss and they ask all the other guys like, hey, are you in charge? Are you in charge? And they come to me last. But I laugh those things off. Like, at the end of the day, I'm in charge. So this is my business. I'm running it how I want to run it. And I'm going to work with people that I feel want to work with me and that we can do good business together. And so there's people that I just don't go back to because I'm not happy with the way they treat me or treat the job site. And then there's people who are great that I want to have long-term relationships with.
Yeah. And I think there's a difference to maybe people who are just like generally unaware. And then they're like, oh, okay, you're leading the job. And then they never think about it again. Or then there's the other people who are less like never going to accept that. And that's obviously not people
Absolutely.
that you're going to work with. But yeah, it's always interesting to me because I do find that it's just a male heavy business, but there's so many fantastic female investors out there now that are finally letting other younger female investors or just new investors say, yeah, you can definitely do this. Do you think that being so open about your journey on the YouTube channel has definitely helped that as well? It makes it more accessible for people to say, I think I can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was going to say is YouTube means there's no market, right? If you have an internet connection, it's not about your local market. It's about whoever is out there in the world that you feel you can connect with and who has a message for you. And so I think there's been a lot of different investors that I've followed and connected with that I would have never met at a local meetup, right? And so that's the benefit of sharing your story through the internet, because you do get to connect with and impact really anybody who wants to log on, not just the people in your own physical vicinity.
Yeah, I feel that way about podcasts too. Going back to what you said about learning from bigger pockets, and I just feel like these are here because they you can do it like you said in the car, you can do it on a walk, and then you can realize later, like we did as kids, like I think I'm learning more than I think I was. But it's going to sink in at some point over and over, and then over time you start to realize, hey, wait, those people that I listen to now I can meet them, and then you realize like investing is big and small. Like I feel like you know who all the players are. But then, like we also said, John Smith down the street probably has 11 properties. He just never talks about them.
Exactly. So yeah, I love the podcast, love the YouTube channels. I think every investor, even if you don't want to be a content creator, I think every investor should at least have some type of footprint online. I tell students that I work with, you can just start an Instagram channel or Instagram page and just take pictures of your successful wholesale deals. And even if you can get like a quick blurb or testimonial from the agent or the buyer or the seller, whatever it's going to be, and put that on Instagram, then the next time you run into somebody that's like, I'm not too sure, you can just send them to that platform and they can see a whole list of all your successful deals. That's something relatively easy to keep up with. But it's just like having that online footprint gives you credibility, lets you reach a much broader audience. And I think it'll only be a good thing for your business.
Yeah. And I wonder if you've found this. I found that documenting my day to day in just real estate investing or whatever I do on market, I really do it for me. I'm excited that other people watch. But like when you started your YouTube channel, I don't know if you thought, hey, in 3 years, I'm going to have 184,000 subs. But like, it's fun. You did it because it's fun. And then over time, I think the public starts to see who's genuine and who's not from that presentation. And I'm on my viewing of your channel, that's how it is. I'm like, you're exactly like you are on the channel. And that's what we always want people to take from our social is, and again, that's like you said, it's going to create social proof. So you can go to that, maybe the hard money lender who doesn't know you and can say, hey, look at my Instagram channel. There's lots of me interacting with sellers there as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been so much fun. I think it's a creative outlet. I think a lot of us who are in this real estate business world can be very analytical. But we also might have a creative side, which has been cool to get out through the YouTube channel. And it's also been a source of accountability. I had this chart up on my wall when I first started, because I started YouTube around the same time as real estate.
Yeah.
I had a chart that I was saying I'm committed to making 100 offers and 100 YouTube videos before I quit. And if I don't like it after 100 offers and 100 videos and I'm not having fun, I'm not making no money, then fine, I'll move on to something else. But I'm at least going to do 100. And so I think having that accountability and saying it like on the channel, saying, okay, guys, this is video 7. I have 93 more to go. Let's figure this thing out. It was a source of accountability that, again, when things didn't go so well, helped me to keep pushing through. And it didn't take 100 videos or 100 offers to start finding the success I was looking for, which was also like a big win, right? Because now I can really keep going.
Yeah, but it's the mindset of saying, I'm going to keep going long term. That's what shortens it up. I think too many people have this short-term thing. They like post one Instagram video as a wholesale and like, I think, no one wants to buy it. They don't know who you are.
Yeah.
You have no credibility. So
I was going to throw in, there's a saying that one of my basketball coaches used to give us about how hard are you going to work, say in the off season? Are you going to wake up every morning and go for a run, or what are you going to do? And he was saying, make the decision once and then just execute. versus waking up and making the decision every day.
Yeah.
Because if you wake up and you make the decision every day, at some point your willpower is going to lose, right? Like you're going to be cold, you're going to be tired, and you're just going to decide to roll back over and not go do it. But if you just make the decision once at the start and don't second guess and question yourself every day, then that helps you stick with it longer. And so I was like, okay, I'm making 100 offers. And I didn't get to offer 17 and say, should I make offer 18?
Right.
I had already made the decision, and then you just try to execute from there.
Yeah. I think that's great. It's great advice. There's a million different things that you can put in that 100 things. You're going to research the market. You're going to go to 100 meetups before you quit. All these ways that they can take advantage. So now, where's your journey going now? I know we talked about it on the pre-call, but where do you want to go now from where you started at wholesaling? What's next?
Yeah, so I have 13 doors right now, and that was the transition. 2 of those are in my house hack.
Yeah.
And then the other ones came from burring. And so that's a combination of single family and duplex burrs that I did the renovation on and then refinanced and kept as rentals. And I really like that portfolio. I really like the cash flow. I really like the equity that we were able to build through those burrs. But I don't want to hide the fact that the market has gotten tougher and that interest rates have made burring much more difficult. And so things have really slowed down on the burr side, specifically because of those interest rates.
Yeah.
I don't really want to flip because, again, I view real estate as a long-term play. And so what we're doing now is looking for more commercial deals and looking to also be involved in like the business side. So not just owning the property, but are there some business ventures that I'm interested in that real estate can be almost like a competitive advantage against the other businesses because we also own the real estate that the business operates out of.
Yeah.
And so, that's a fun kind of not completely clear space that we're in right now. Maybe that looks like residential commercial spaces. Maybe that looks like something else, but wanting to get out of just the single family, one property at a time space and get into something that's a little bit more market resistant to some of the interest rate changes and things like that.
Yeah, my favorite is exactly what you're saying is mixed use. I just love quasi-residential and commercial, especially for what you say. If you're a creative person and say you get a 2/2, which is like a mixed use, 2 commercial downstairs retail, 2 residential upstairs, you can put a business in, see if it works. If not, you just rent it out. But I've always advocated this, and not everybody knows it. Like you can use an FHA loan to house hack a mixed use commercial property if it's 51% more square footage for the residential. It's one of the greatest hacks in the business. Is that something you've thought about? Because I feel like that matches just what you've said. And you can play around. You can start a business, you can close it, and retail tenants, generally they're going to have longer leases. They're going to do build outs on their own. And then you have a diversified asset inside just one asset.
I have, especially now that I've met the criteria, more than met it, of living in my first house hack for 12 months. That residential or owner occupied loan is opened up to me again. So I think there's so much opportunity out there. I also think the benefit of being a content creator is that the things that I try, even if they fail, if I document them, that's still a plus, right? Because I'm still making the content on YouTube and there's different revenue streams from that. So I think that frees me up a little bit more to be creative and try new things and share what works and what doesn't, rather than just trying to say, okay, I figured out how to do single family burrs. Let me just stick with that forever because that's safe. I think having the content creation side gives me a little bit more room to experiment and be creative.
Yeah. And if you felt like over time, your content creation side is definitely going to help you in terms of like partnerships long-term as you go bigger, there's going to be people who say, look, I've been watching you for 3 years. I know you're trustworthy. Let's do deals together.
Absolutely. And some of that has already happened. And I've had private money lenders for some of my burrs, moving away from hard money just because it's so much more expensive. But just like whether it's sponsors for the channel, partners for different deals, other wholesalers who want to wholesale to me or JV with me, having the content has opened up a ton of different opportunities.
Yeah. Amazing. Just in case somebody doesn't know where to find you, tell them the best places to find you on YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah, so my name on both of those platforms is Lili Invest. So that's Lili. And I like to think that the past 3 years have been Lili Invests in real estate. And that might be going towards Lili Invests in commercial real estate or Lili Invests in brick and mortar businesses. Who knows? But yeah, Lili invests on all different platforms, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And connect with us over there, see how the journey's going, and reach out if there's any way I can help with you.
And where would they find the coaching program that you're doing now?
Yes, you can go to liliinvest.com. And we have a couple different coaching programs. One of them is a smaller scale where we call it our Run the Numbers program. And that's really to help people learn how to find their ARV, estimate rehab, and present good, solid deals. And so that's a little bit more focused. And then we also have something called our Beginner's Bootcamp, which is over 14 days that kind of gives people a broader view of everything that you might need to know to get started making offers and really taking that action.
Yeah, amazing. Last question before we hop off. If you could give new investors one piece of advice based on your journey the last 3 years, what would it be in today's climate and market?
Where there's a problem, there's an opportunity. So find the problem.
That's great.
So I think that there was a very different problem last year, a different problem 2, 3, 5 years ago. And so sometimes we look and say that problem no longer exists. And so there's no opportunity. But I promise you, there is a problem right now. It might be a different problem, but there's a problem and an opportunity attached. So if you can find the problem, you can find the opportunity.
Well, Lili, it was an absolute pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for spending time today.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on. And I'm really glad to get to be a part of the show. I really like listening to it, and I'll continue to be a fan.
All right. Thanks so much. That was Lili Thompson. I'm Jonathan Green, and this was episode 46 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. We'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with me, Jonathan Green. And I just want to remind you, and this is always an uncomfortable part, I don't want you to think that I'm begging for you to like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you have to do for the podcast, leave a 5-star review. But if you like the podcast and you think it adds value in the real estate investing sphere, then just do me a personal favor. Like the podcast, follow it, share it when you can with your friends, and be so kind as to write a 5-star review if you believe it deserves a 5-star review up against what else is out there. I would really appreciate it, and I hope you keep listening.